Hello. Thank you for coming out and staying with us the whole day. Thanks for telling me. Thanks for coming out and staying with us and being part of this incredible experience. I've been given the honor to introduce our next speaker. Chris Long is a roadman of the Native American Church, which is part of a peyote tradition used spiritually and religiously. And he's the founder of the Singing Stone, which is a Native American church community in Crestone, Colorado. I've had the privilege of getting to know him through one of our interns, Alejandra Cordova, who was a member of his church and sponsored 3 ceremonies last year for our community. And I had the incredible privilege of being part of a ceremony this last May, and I just want to say it was one of the most profound experiences of my life. And those words don't describe what's possible with this work and what Chris does. So please welcome Chris Long. Thank you.
All right. Well, it's good to see everybody gathered here today, and it's an honor to be able to come up here and talk. And I'd like to talk about the use of entheogens, and we use the sacred sacrament of the herb peyote, and we also facilitate ceremonies by hosting people that do ayahuasca ceremonies and those kind of things, and it's really interesting work. It's become my mission to safeguard the ancient traditions, and especially in this coming new age that's dawning upon humankind, and it's a beautiful time. And in the use of entheogens and any kind of substance, we can call them a medicine, and in essence these are drugs. And I know that can be kind of like a dirty word sometimes, but it's really very good that we not have any illusions or delusions about any of these substances. You know, as a traditional practitioner and roadman, it's very important to embrace the scientific view of things, because I think it's very important the changes that are happening in the human mind and becoming more intelligent and more developing the cognitive mind more. And we're entering into a new age of world peace and a coming utopia. And so it's very important that we really preserve the ancient as well as the new. And so the question is here, really, what does a drug do? And a lot of people will say, well, it changes your perception. You have perceptual changes. But it's a lot more than that. I mean, I can pick up a rock off the ground and look at it, and it will change my perception when I see the stone in my hand. And so everything affects our perception. That's basically what we are, we are perception. You could say that the only thing you really own is your body, but truly, it's really the only thing that you have is your perception. And in the spiritual and religious context, we believe that is goes beyond the body as well. And but just really looking at what a drug does is basically it stands between signals of your brain and your body. And so basically you could think of all of these substances as being forms of anesthesia, that they're actually cutting you off from part of your mind and part of your body. And so how does it really serve us? Well, it does a very interesting thing, you know. It's almost like looking through a lens and having a different perception. And so it's a very interesting phenomena that we can alter our perception. I like to think of it as looking through a set of lenses, making up like a microscope. You know, when you look down a microscope, you have a very unique and incredible view of whatever is in that slide of the microscope. And you're not necessarily aware of the rest of the world around you, but you can see this, whatever that you're looking at, very interesting way. And so it's very important that we not have any illusions about different substances. And I know there's the belief that a substance has a spirit, like the ayahuasca, or we kind of personify peyote as being grandfather peyote. And so, sure, it has a spirit, and everything has a spirit. Everything with physical form has an invisible form. And that's a really ancient belief about everything. And but it's important that we understand that all of these entheogens and different substances aren't a source of power. They're not a source of energy. They basically are opening a doorway of perception for us to use our own energy. And so, but in terms of a psychedelic or a hallucinogen, it does something very interesting. Most people would say, well, yeah, hallucinogen allows you to see images and complex mathematical patterns and symbols. And so what this is really doing is it's allowing us to access the symbolical mind. Now that's the part of the mammalian brain that we used to all think with. As a human race, we all thought with the symbolical mind. And so that's the part of the mind that all animals think with. And we have stopped using it because we use language to think with. And so if we have a baby, before it learns to speak, uses images and symbols to think with. And a lot of us retain that. For instance, if you get somebody to gaze into a crystal ball and ask them to tell us what they see, well, they're going to have some kind of an image that comes to mind. And that can be interpreted symbolically, you know, as a message from the symbolic mind and from the subconscious. So that's a very important point, that we can actually access the subconscious mind with a substance. And you can do it in many different ways. You can do it through sleep, through dreams. We see symbols and can learn about our bodies and different parts of ourselves. And I'll get back to that later, talking about the symbolic mind and the subconscious and the importance of communicating with the subconscious, because that's in psychology and in religion and spirituality. That's really what we're doing there is contacting our subconscious mind. We're making a connecting link to that subconscious, and it's vitally important for our health. And so, it's funny to me too to think in all the formal and informal training that I've received as a roadman, and to see and to imagine in the 60s somebody getting ready to take a 4-way hit of window pane, this super powerful LSD, and they're about to take this with this tremendous apprehension, like, oh, what's it going to do, you know? Or let's find out what it's going to do if I put this on my tongue. What's going to happen? What am I going to see, you know? And or being afraid, you know, and go ahead and take it anyway. And it seems like if you do that with this big question mark in your mind, well, your whole experience is just going to be this big question mark, or this like unnerving apprehension. And you can imagine someone getting ready to take something like that while saying, well, you know, I might even lose my mind, you know, and then actually doing that, you know. I mean, you could give someone a placebo and say, you know, you might lose your mind if you take this placebo. And they may actually lose their mind, you know. It's like if someone's eats a bunch of food and then you tell them, you know what, I think that there was something wrong with it, with that food, well, you'll probably get a stomach ache regardless of what was in the food. And so in the Native American church and also in these, with all entheogens, substances used in a religious or spiritual way, we usually pray first and get into the mood. And yeah, you'll hear like, that's what they basically learned in the 60s with LSD and all of that, is that, well, you need a good environment if you're going to take a substance. And it's a lot bigger than that, because, I mean, you can do almost anything with the human mind. And to think that you could take a substance and just have a bunch of fun and look at the symbols and all of that is really a waste of energy. And we're given a certain amount of energy when we're conceived. And we can use that energy throughout our life for many different things, for almost anything. And but if you squander it, then you won't be able to achieve some of these great goals that we could achieve. So it's really important, the intention to set with using anything. And people will say that culturally about food or anything, that, you know, if you eat this food in a good way, then you'll feel good. And same with cooking food. If you cook food with a good attitude, then it's going to feel nourishing. Yeah, so using your intention is very important. And so one could think of this, if you use an entheogen or any kind of a substance that's going to alter your perception and basically put you in contact with your subconscious mind, well, you can use it as a divination, a source of divination. And that's really how all of these things are used. It's by asking a question. And so you can ask a question about an herb and say, what is this herb good for? And a lot of scientists have wondered, well, how did these people in the Amazon know about making ayahuasca? You know, it's a combination of things, and it can be a combination of many different things. It can be made in several different ways. And the pH has to be just right. Everything has to be just right for that to be made. And so a lot of scientists have wondered, well, how did these guys do this? Like through trial and error, they try it over and over, and that's a ridiculous thought. So really, what happened here is people saw this herb and they used a different entheogen and they prayed, show me what this is for. So they were basically accessing their subconscious and connecting with the spirit world. And that's I'll talk about that in great depth here in a few minutes, about our subconscious mind and how that connects to the spirit world. And so people would find things out like that. And it's like that with ayahuasca is a good example of that. When it came to our culture here in the United States and well all over the world, it's kind of accepted as this as like a religion in a way. And really in the Amazon it isn't really used in that way. And so it's in a very different context with our people here. And but in the jungle, you know, they used it 50% of the time, or even more, even 75% of the time. It was used for warfare. It was used for witchcraft. Like it was used to know what your enemy was up to and to deliver a blow to them. And so that's a good example of using the intention, using your intention with a substance. And that goes to show, too, what's really working here. We'd like to think that it's here in the West, we'd like to think that it's the spirit of the medicine is helping us. And it's not like a cure-all, like it's just going to just do what it's supposed to do. And that's a very inappropriate way to take any of these medicines, is to think that I'm going to take it and it's going to do what it's supposed to. I mean, that's it, putting forth an intention, and that's good. But you could achieve a whole lot more by taking it with a specific intention. And so also, you know, like I said, this is a catalyst for our existing energy. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know how much fuel it takes to get to the moon. If you've just taken some substance that is going to blast you off planet to the moon, you know, what are you going to do with your time while you're there? Are you going to just play around with the weightlessness and laugh and giggle and throw moon rocks and stuff, and you know, or are you going to like take samples? You could take samples. You could look for signs of life. You know, you could look for water crystals and things like that, and that's a much better use of that. So be careful too. It's very important that we not squander our precious resources of our life force on just having a good old time. I mean, it's important to have fun. Don't get me wrong, but it's also important to really to learn something and to make good use of your energy. And so there's this interesting thing where you see this image of this witch flying on a broom across the moon. And there's this image that we've all heard of someone flying on a magic carpet, or the Indians in this area would fly in baskets. They would make a basket just for that purpose and sit in it and fly with this basket. And also the Aztecs, they used to fly on brooms, and also there's a phenomena of were animals. You've all heard of the werewolf and the Werewolf of London, but also were animals all across this continent. It's a very potent image of somebody turning into an animal, and that's a specific thing, you know. And I had the great fortune of learning that from Navajo elders when I was a teenager. And it's interesting because I did some research on it and found that all over the world people use the exact same plant and the exact same formula to achieve these goals. And so I remember asking my teacher, how did all these different people in the world know how to use this plant in a specific way? And he said, well, he said that those things are learned from the plant itself. That you can learn that from the spirits. Basically, by accessing your subconscious mind, you can receive the recipe to be able to do that. And so it's interesting that all these people all over the world would use the same substance. And it's further interesting too that that someone would see someone flying across the moon in a broom, you know, or that a Navajo would see a were animal running through their yard. And there's the European stories too of shooting the werewolf with the silver bullet, and then they know who it was because one of the villagers has a bullet wound. And so this is a situation where the dream world and the physical world kind of become intermeshed in a kind of interesting way. And yeah, so this really draws the question up in my mind about really what is the subconscious mind? If this is like accessing the subconscious mind and it's this powerful, you know. I was guided in my visions for an explanation and got a really good one, you know. They explained about all the cells in our bodies they, meaning the spirits, the spirits explained about the cells in our bodies. You know, there's billions of cells in your body, and they all have their own feelings. They all have their own life. A lot of them have their own agenda, independent of your body. But when some of those cells have a problem, they sure can alert you to the problem really easily. And even through the subconscious mind, through your dreams. And then there's all different other forms of life that live in a symbiotic relationship with us. There's billions of bacteria that live in your gut, and they have their own feelings, their own families, their own lives that they live. And yet we need them to digest food. And it's an interesting phenomenon. And in a likewise way, we have connection to many different things in our subconscious. And psychologists are still trying to unravel all of that. We're really in the beginning stages of knowing really what we are. I mean, there's been all kinds of experiments where they hypnotize a group of people and ask them, well, where are my car keys? And they know. So, you know, scientifically they would have to say, well, yeah, the subconscious mind of this person, you know, mathematically knew the variables of where the car keys probably are. And that's a ridiculous, you know, reductionist scientific thought. And so there's this, so we're really overlaid of many different things. There's all kinds of different things that make up a human being. We're almost like complex radios that can tune in the different forces of the universe, basically. And so it's very, very interesting. The quantum physics question that was posed really long time ago was if a tree falls in the forest and if there's no one there, can you hear it? Will it make a sound? You know, if there's no one there to hear it, will it make a sound? And that's ridiculous because the trees and the animals are all there to hear that. And, you know, the trees themselves can sense that and know it. They have feelings. We know this, you know. So, but the real question is if a conjurer is going to summon some spirits, can he do it in a place where nobody's there? And I don't think he can, really, because the spirits, when a conjurer summons spirits in a ceremony or in any way, they come through our subconscious mind. They actually come from within us. And I know in the Uwipi ceremony that we do, the spirits are able to levitate objects and move things and do any number of unbelievable things. And I've found that if you have a group of people that believe that a stone can be levitated and even may expect it to do that, it will. And so there's this really big question with the domestication of humankind as we become more domesticated. Is it a possibility that we could actually cut ourselves off from magic? We're already cutting ourselves off from the symbolical mind and from the subconscious. And so it's very important that we preserve these ways and that we learn more from our animal natures. And so also in a ceremony, a lot of times you'll have incredible things happen in there. And I had the experience one time of being in a ceremony and seeing, it seemed like I was between my cells or even atoms within myself, and I could see these things shoot into the cells, and then they would like swell up, and then they would become real skinny again, and then they would shoot through. And I remember asking one of these things, I said, what are you? What's going on? And they said, well, we're spirits. And I thought it was interesting because it kind of looked like an umbrella and a fish, you know. So I was kind of like, okay, all right. So I kind of probed the spirits about this, and they explained. They said, well, everything has a spirit, right? And I had to say, well, yeah, I guess so. And they said, well, like a number has a spirit. Say the number 22. And I thought about it. And I thought, well, if I see the number 22 in a book, that's really not a spirit. I mean, it's just like ink. It's something the human brain sees, and it says it's 22. They said, yeah, but it connects to this like greater 22. Like there would not be a number 22 if there wasn't one up there, you know, as above, so below, you know, on earth as it is in heaven, that all of that kind of thing. That's really a physics question there. And so it's very interesting thinking about that everything has a spirit. And so when we talk about spirits, it could mean anything really. So yeah, so when we're using a substance that puts us in contact with our subconscious mind, we're actually accessing the spirit world, and we can ask any number of things, and it's very important that we do that we ask the right things. But one of the biggest things, you know, one of the biggest and most important issues of about psychedelics or entheogens or any of this is as a foundation of a culture of the Americas. What was so important about this is the same as it is in other countries too, or was in the past, like in India with the soma, and it was the nectar of the gods. The flesh of the gods, the nectar of immortality, that which could grant you immortality. And that's really the greatest work of religion, of spirituality, is this question of immortality. And it's same with or without any kind of substance or entheogen. It's just like getting involved in a business or a corporation or something like that. Really, if you wanted to climb this corporate ladder, what you would want to do is you'd want to make friends. You'd want to enlist the help of other people. And so you'd be nice to your coworkers and get to know them. And in that way, you could rise to the top. And it's the same way in spirituality, you know. What we're doing here is we're enlisting the help of other spirits. It's the same in Christianity. Basically, Christianity is like you have a friend, and then all his friends are yours, and and they can all help you to go to heaven, basically. And so that's really what the ancients were doing with entheogens, is communicating with the spirits, communing with the spirits. And so we see that in different cultures too. Like in Europe, the witches had familiars, and a lot of times people would say, oh, that's just their pet black cat or whatever. But no, they were a lot more. These were spirits that people came in contact with and received help from. And so it's the same in this continent. That's what we do in the ceremonies, is we talk to the spirits. We can ask questions of them, and it's believed that we were given the ability to speak, to be able to ask questions of them, and that we were given intelligence so that we could actually receive messages from the spirit and then act them out. And yeah, so it's important not to get this all confused with schizophrenia, because that is a real issue there. But yeah, and that's something that we can deal with through exorcism, type thing, is actually getting a unhealthy symbiotic relationship or even a parasitic relationship with a spirit, and to separate that from a person. And so there is hope for, in the case of schizophrenia and all that sort of thing, with spirituality and in even the use of certain plants. And so there's also, in using an entheogen for immortality, that's really a very profound thought. And that's the way that these medicines were used on this continent. And there are many, many immortals, people that have lived for thousands of years. And if you ever come upon such a being, don't forget to ask them how they attained their immortality. And my guess is that they will tell you that they gained it through the use of a certain entheogen. And so this is a really interesting subject, because as I said before, we're basically perception. That's what we are. So we have a perception. And so if we can learn to sustain our perception, just like in a lucid dream. If you're able to learn to lucid dream and to maintain your perception in that dream perpetually, then your body could die and you could just go on. And I'm saying this with conviction, because I have met immortals, and I know others that have as well, and talked to them in great depth about how they attained such a state. And so I think it's really important, because we're coming upon this time when we're developing this higher consciousness that we have. It's interesting, because for about 150 years, scientists have been breeding mice for intelligence. And it's very interesting. Some of the work that was done with rats, I think some of that work was terminated, but some of these rats developed full frontal cortexes and even a soft spot on their head, just like a human baby has a soft spot. And they were incredibly intelligent. I don't know what happened to that particular strain of rats that were like that, but people have been running mice through mazes, and it's a really interesting thing, because these mice are very domesticated, and so they've kind of traded this intelligence, if you would call it that, for this innate knowingness. And so there's this very interesting and scientifically measurable difference between domestic and wild. And so you can see in the fields with the domestic cattle, they seem to be like almost contemplating things while they stand there, and yeah, but they also seem kind of, in a way, dumb, in a lot of ways. And this is something that can be measured. Like if you look at the buffalo out in the field when it snows and conditions get adverse, they start running around and playing and having a good time. And people like to grow cattle because they're easy to deal with. They'll stand in line while you butcher them and all of that. But with buffalo, you can't hardly even get them into a chute to give them an injection. They'll break the chute. They'll just go berserk, And that's the same with the wild mouse. You put the wild mouse in the maze and you try to get it to run the maze. It won't run the maze. It refuses to do that. It won't go there. It'll go the other way, or it'll chew through the wall, or it'll just sit there and say, I'm just going to sit here and I'm not doing anything else. So it's an interesting thing, this domestication. We really are going through that because we're getting more intelligent. And there's a lot of other problems that go along with all of that. Like if you look at, if you take a wild animal and you put it into a cage and you give it a routine, then it'll start to get domestic. And there are certain things that go along with that, like neuroses. Right away it starts to develop mental illness, and which you know, there's all kinds of mental illness, but something like schizophrenia is something you do find in the wild among wild animals. But neurotic behavior is something of domestic animals and human beings. And the things that we're doing with our mind are incredible. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we're dawning on this age of actually reaching a utopia. But are we willing to trade that for our wild side? It's interesting. The wild mind has an innate natural knowingness, that intuitive and instinctive knowingness that the domestic person does not have. You can just imagine the scenario of a domestic person walking through the forest to get to the mountain of spirituality, and it being a very difficult task, you know, of calculating the directions and all of that, whereas the Neanderthal would just start walking and seem to know where it is. And so I think it's important that we not trade the higher cognitive mind for and then leave our symbolic mind out of the picture. It's very important that we keep a connection between these two parts of our brain. It's essential. And yeah, so with domestication, it's been a major focus of mine, because there's also the quantum physics question of what will happen if everybody stops believing. What if the human race actually becomes a race of organic computers? What if we actually lose the belief in the spirit entirely? There's the thought that there's a collective mindset that when a scientist comes up with a discovery, that there's actually other scientists through the world that have that same discovery at the same time, or around the same time. It's like they were working on it together on a kind of a collective mind. And there's the idea that if we actually all became atheistic zombies, that we would actually could stop the possibility of magic. And I think that's a very, very important thing that psychedelics can remedy. And I think it's important that we keep this connection with our symbolic mind, and that we draw upon the wisdom that's there deep within us. And so, yeah, so it's a very interesting thing about the symbolic mind. That's something that people know very little about, and yet that's the main question in psychology. If you have a problem, they try to like access your subconscious mind, and that can be done in many different ways. Basically, if you're given some kind of an anesthesia and you go out, they say that, oh, the subconscious mind can still hear everybody talking, and it's hearing all of that. And it's the same with a lot of different things. If you fall asleep, some part of yourself is still listening. And so it's a very interesting thing, just like in what I described about a group of people that are hypnotized, and then they're asked kind of divination questions like, where are my keys, you know? So it's very important that we hang on to that subconscious mind. And so we can see that this is a serious issue here, is keeping entheogens alive, and that's really what we're doing with the legal part of the Native American church, is preserving that tradition. And I think it needs to be preserved now more than ever, because it's something that we're going to need. I mean, you can imagine our children or children's children, the kind of life that they may be living. I mean, you may actually have to arc weld on the moon to pay your oxygen bill. And it's a terrifying thought, but we could also create a utopia. and where the mind is allowed to blossom and to grow in a very healthy way without war or suffering. And it's also very important in that kind of a scenario that we work hard with our minds. I mean, it's no easy task to just go to a ceremony and then to just receive some kind of great message. It's a lot of work, and it's not easy, you know. So we kind of had this idea in the medical association that they could give you prescribe you a medication and it'll just take care of the problem, just like magic. And none of it's really like that, especially in terms of working with our minds and our subconscious and spiritual growth and all of that. We want to be able to work on that and work on ourselves. And we say that in the Native American church. We say the spirits are going to take you halfway, and then you're going to have to do the other 50% of it. So I think it's always a situation of that. So it's very important that we not completely relax and suspect that a substance is just going to do what it's supposed to do or what it needs to do. I mean, it's good to put that out there, but you could go a step further by saying, I want to know what I need to be doing in my life to make myself more holistic, or something like that. You can ask very specific questions. What is this other herb used for? This herb that's growing in my backyard. You know, you could go and sit down with that plant and just ask and say, I'm going to take this entheogen, I'm going to eat this peyote, this medicine, so that I can know what this herb is for. And you'll get some very good descriptions of what it's for. And that's something that can even be experimented with in a laboratory setting. You could give people a problem and see if they can actually find out what a particular herb is for, or where the car keys are hidden, and get a group of people to do that, and you'll come up with some very good questions. And that leads me to think about how these medicines and all these different substances were used in groups. This is really a powerful thing, having the group consciousness and the collective mind of a group in a situation. And I spoke about my visions of the spirits, of them explaining what spirits are and all of that. And you know, one of the things that I was impressed with the most was how they described how a ceremony works, that they use all the tools available to achieve the most positive goal that they could. And that's, of course, with the intention of the group, that the group is intending that they're all there to receive some kind of help, psychological help, spiritual help, and even physical help. And so it's not the medicine itself, the spirit of the peyote or the ayahuasca. It's these spirits that we work with that are part of our families, that are part of our, like the so-called animal totem, you know, is like a family spirit, a collective of spirits. And that's what a tradition is a collective of spirits. This collective of spirits can help you, and they help us all the time. You can ask the spirits, you can pray in any kind of a spiritual tradition and ask for help, and it'll come to you in some form if you're open to it. And especially if you're open to connecting with the subconscious. We do that in all forms of spirituality. We can be said to enter into an altered state, you know, through prayer, through focusing, through meditation, through singing. And that is a way of accessing our subconscious. So I think that the future of entheogens needs to be protected and upheld, because there's incredible traditions and spiritual systems that are very powerful, and we need to be able to protect them. And that's through the Native American Church. We've protected peyote and ayahuasca and many different psychedelics, if you want to call them that. We call them medicines. And so that's something that I would like to offer to everybody here too, is that if you feel like you want to be involved in protecting these ways, then you could become a member of the Native American Church. We offer memberships and also can protect you in your use of medicines. So I feel like that even in a recreational way of using certain things, I know if you just go to the desert and you eat peyote, it's going to help you, even if you have no intention of receiving help. And I've heard stories of that too. This guy was telling me he went into Mexico, and those guys said, yeah, there's peyote growing out there. And he thought he would go out there for a couple hours and eat some. And well, it took him about a week to get back. And yeah. And this guy was I'm not going to tell stories, but this guy was a bad guy. He was like a part of the Hells Angels, And after he went through that, he was a peaceful man, and he wouldn't hurt a thing. And so just by having any of these medicines even in a recreational way, I think is a lot more spiritual than not using them. So I feel like they need to be protected. And so I want to offer that all to you too, if you want to become a member of the Native American Church. That's something that we offer, and we want to be able to protect these ways. And because it's so important for our coming changes in our culture. And I foresee that it won't be unlike Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, that we will use these medicines, and we're going to need them, especially if we enter into that higher cortex of our mind. And so I want to thank everybody for listening to me, and if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer any questions. So thank you.
At one point you were talking about exorcism and feeling like there being like a parasitic spirit. I experienced something like that, but I'm wondering if there's any alternative explanations for what might actually be going on there.
Well, there's a lot of alternative explanations. I mean, I'm sure there's a scientific explanation. If you have like a sore arm, there's a scientific explanation for that, but there can be numerous other explanations, and one of them is the explanation of a symbolic relationship or a parasitic connection with an ethereal entity, and that's really one of the main things that you deal with in the use in the religious use of an entheogen. That's one of the main things that we do, really, is to shed dependencies to other beings, and that's a main theme not only in the Native American Church with the peyote, but also with the ayahuasca. That's one of the main concerns there, and it used to be the main concern of psychology before it kind of got affected by the reductionalist scientific thinking. They kind of, and that kind of thought, that's the whole idea of, let's see, this baby needs a certain temperature, it needs certain amount of oxygen, so we'll take it from its mother and we'll put it in this plastic box, without the thought of, oh, maybe it needs part of the electrical magnetic field of its mother, and there's, if we took that into consideration, there's ways we can figure this all out. But yeah, if I would think that our association with different spirits is so vast That's something that happens all the time. I mean, a lot of your thoughts are actually spirits passing through you. So sometimes we confuse them for our thoughts, and we think, oh, why am I having this deja vu? Well, it's actually a presence of a different spirit there. And that's how the primitive human would interpret it too. So, yeah.
I wonder if you'd be willing to speak to in the Navajo tradition, there's a bit of an ordeal, the embrace of an ordeal, a night-long journey. Could you speak to the value of the ordeal in the journey?
Yes, that's what I was kind of touched on a little bit about the spirits will do 50% and then you need to do the other 50%. And the Navajos always say that. I think at every ceremony they'll say that. But yeah, it is an ordeal, and it's not like a simple thing. I mean, even for the biker guy that took off in the desert and started eating peyote, and he wound up out there for a whole week, and it was an ordeal, but he learned invaluable things about the sanctity of living things and taking responsibility for your actions and all that sort of thing. And it's really important in these traditions that we don't domesticate them. I mean, that's happened to all kinds of religious traditions where we've domesticated them and we've basically taken the difficult part out of it. I mean, now you can go to a church and you can just sit there and listen to the sermon, and he kind of moves your mind with the words, and that's it. It's like air conditioned. It's all nice. People come to the peyote ceremony and they're like, whoa, all of the smoke. And I'm like, well, this is part of it, There's the idea that intelligence came about because of the cavemen and the smoke, the amount of smoke. And there's something to it, to feeling the contrast of cold and hot. That's really what makes a domestic person, is when you control the environment completely, then there is no contrast there. So it's important to have that contrast, to have the live fire there. I mean, I could imagine in the first century Christians in a modern Christian church, they would think that they were on another planet, because these were guys that were around live fire, sleeping in the dirt in the desert. It was a totally different experience. So yeah, there's this whole concept of making it easier, like which is happening with the ayahuasca ceremonies. They're being basically domesticated, and by doing that, you can kind of take part of the fire out of it. And so it's really important that we keep it wild. So, yes.
Would you please describe the Native American church, because I'm trying to make a concept of it in my mind. I know what Mass looks like for Catholicism. What does a Native American Mass or a program look like?
Well, basically, we all sit around the fire, and it's a very structured and organized system. But we sit around the fire, and we pass the peyote around, and everybody has some, and then we sing in between. And before the ceremony, everybody prays. And so, so it's sitting around a fire with the fire in the center, and all this symbolism that goes with any ritual is there. So, yeah. Yes?
Could you talk on the relationship between contemplative practices and psychedelics and medicines? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, just like what I was saying is that what characterizes a tradition is a collective of spirits. So you can look at a modern tradition, let's say modern as in 2,000 to 8,000 years, is going to have certain saints and spirit helpers. That's what we call them, spirit helpers. So you look at a tradition that is 14 to 26,000 years old, it's going to have more spirit helpers. And so a lot of times people will just make up a ritual and say, oh, we're going to take this substance and we're all going to hang out and we're going to connect with the Great Spirit. And it's good to have that intention and the structure there, but then there may not be the correct spirit helpers there, or enough help or good help. A lot of times if you just have a ceremony and you create your own ceremony, you're attracting spirits from neighboring areas. You may be drawing up ancestral spirits from your own family. I mean, they're always there. But then in a situation like that, they can even manifest and change things, which, you know, if you're not on good terms with your ancestors because of breaking taboos or offending them. I mean, we've all heard of that. I've offended the spirits, you know. That's a big real thing. A lot of us do that without knowing that. If your family is not supposed to eat fish and you don't even know about it and you eat fish, then your ancestral spirits may have a problem with it, you know. And so if you just do this made-up ceremony, then it could run into trouble, but I would say it's better than just tripping out and skipping across the desert on your own. So, yeah, so yeah, the intention is everything, and that's you know, true with spirituality. But there are certain benefits to a true tradition because of its it basically has a more validity with God. There's more time spent there, so it's more credible, you could say, like as a track history with that tradition and the rest of the universe. So, yeah, and there was another question over here. Yes?
You were talking about preserving traditions with the Native American Church in terms of peyote, and you also mentioned ayahuasca.
Uh-huh.
I'm wondering if you integrate other indigenous cultures in the Native American Church.
Yes, and you know, that's what's happening now, is basically the evolution of these traditions, and it's you know, there are a lot of people that think that a tradition should stay the same, it shouldn't change, but traditions have always grown and changed, and that's what's so important, you know, with looking at Lakota traditions. I mean, the peyote ceremony is very new to their tradition, but it's been completely incorporated. Or like the Navajo, I mean, that's like bread and butter for them, is the peyote ceremony. And but yeah, those things are coming together. You know, the peyote ceremony has been traveling south since the 1970s, and it traveled north all the way up to Greenland and all over the world. But yeah, it's gone all down south, and when they receive it, a tribe receives the peyote ceremony, and they're like, wow, this is powerful medicine. And it was very much like when the Lakota received it, they put the pipe on the altar with it, and put the Bible there too, you know, and put the peyote button on top, and then put the eagle feather there, like with the Sundance, and they said, this is what we have to work with. And so it also created different factions that believe different things, like you're not supposed to have that pipe there, and we don't like the Bible sitting there, and all that. But there's all different groups and factions, and now in South America, there's Native American churches all out there. The group that I'm part of has 200,000 members in South America. The Fuego Sagrado de Atzachalatlan Native American Church, and there's groups down there that use ayahuasca along with it, San Pedro, and all of these various things, because in their innocent way of receiving this tradition, they've done what is most comfortable to them. And so there's all different kinds of Native American churches now, and one of the newest big churches is in Africa, and it's really interesting because this is in a tribe that actually has its own religion and ceremony structure intact, and yet they want to receive the peyote ceremony and practice it, and they do so very well. They've learned the songs, you know, you learn them on YouTube, the Navajo songs and all that. And it's really interesting because there's this African tribe that has totally taken on the peyote ceremony, and also the South African people. When they have a ceremony, they have blacks and whites come together and eat that ceremony, eat the peyote in one ceremony as one peoples. And it's a beautiful thing what's happening now. So, yeah, any more questions? Yes?
So besides setting a specific intention, I'm curious about the other 50%. Like when you're actually in ceremony and working with, say, peyote specifically.
Yeah, so that's a really good question because, like for instance, in the case of an exorcism, or you could even look at it in a purely scientific way, even, and throw out the whole idea of the spirits and all of that, that you're gonna feel like something has been removed from you and you're changed, and then in your day-to-day life you're gonna have to act responsibly in that way. And so in the sense of having an entity removed from yourself, well, all of a sudden there's this empty space there that used to occupy something, and something's going to want to get in there. And that's why a lot of people wear like a talisman or something like that that can actually keep that out, even if it's a psychological device like that. And so that's a good example of like the 50% right there is that you would have to then have boundaries. Like a lot of times with, like in the case of schizophrenia, a person has no boundaries and they have this connection to their subconscious. They can hear their subconscious just jabbering away. And any old thing can get in there and do that. And if you can get them to establish boundaries, they can actually revoke that part of their mind. And yeah, and if you can exercise a person like that and get them to have boundaries, clear boundaries, and not allow other things in, and even repeat that as a mantra that only certain things are allowed in. And it's the same with your house. Some people just let anybody in their house, but I know with having kids, I can't do that. I'm like, no, you have to stay outside, And it's the same with my body. They can't all just come in. Yes.
Given the incredible depth of experience as a peyote elder, what was it like for you to experience ayahuasca? If that's not too intimate a question.
Yeah, well, it was. Usually on those occasions, I was working. I was taking care of the fire. And I was very busily engaged in that, in the work. And so I couldn't really sit there and watch what it was doing. But so it was very much the same to me. When the medicine came around, I took it as a sacrament, and I would go about my business, which was taking care of the fire. And yeah, and say my prayer. And so it wasn't really all that different, even though they're two totally different things. Yeah, I mean, one is like speed and the other one's like an opiate. So it's like, yeah, you bring them together, you would think that it would be profoundly different, but not really. And especially in the way that it would help you and allow you to see yourself honestly and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, they are very different in the way they make you feel, but in a way, not really, too. So, and I always did that from very early on. I would do both in these different, because there are different churches and they do different ways. So, yeah. So yeah. Okay. So thank you.